Hello everyone, welcome to one more episode of Excel School. In this lesson, we are going to learn about Excel offset formula. We'll talk about how the offset formula can help us, what is this formula at all, and then we'll learn some examples of the offset formula. And then I will also explain how to use offset formula to define dynamic named ranges, as well as how to use offset formulas in charts. Of course, we will not complete the charting topic in this lesson alone. We'll have to revisit it during our charting topics in the later weeks. So let's get started. Some of you may have heard about the offset formula when you have used some other Excel formulas, or maybe you have had experience with offset formula yourself. What Excel offset formula does is, it is a kind of range formula. It is used to look up some values. The way it works in layman terms is like this. You have all these cells in Excel. For example, this cell is called B4 and this cell is called D4, and this range is called B4 to D4. Similarly, this range is called B4 to B11. Now, it is very common for us to have tabular data in Excel when we are processing some information, or when we need to summarize some figures or something like that. And we may not know the whole picture, but we will know that where the table is starting. For example, I know that this table is starting in cell B4. I don't know how long this table is going through. We know at this point, but if the data is going to change every month or every week, then we will not have any idea how this is going to look at some point in time. But we know for sure that it is starting from this point. And we also know that if the data is starting at this point, the interesting figures are probably two columns to the left, like two columns to the right here in this column, or maybe three rows further down like this. So we know a starting point, and we know how much we should move the selection to here or here, like, or here itself. That is, for example, from here, if I want to go here, this is two cells to the right and two cells to the bottom, three cells to the bottom. So in most cases, when we have tabular data, this is the kind of scenario we have. We know where the top left corner of our data is, and we have to go to a certain position in the data, somewhere diagonally or somewhere to the right or somewhere to the down or something like that, or even to the left or top. So Excel offset formula can help you do that. It may sound like a bit of silly formula at this point, but once you start manipulating tables of data in Excel, this will come out like a very powerful formula. What it does is, Excel offset formula, I'll just tell the syntax, then we will go and write an example formula before we dig deep into offset formula. What Excel offset formula does is, it takes a corner like this, and then it will ask you how many rows you want to go down or go up. You can just enter any positive or negative number, and then how many columns you want to move from this point. So you can say, for example, let us write an offset formula that will give you this number 2, provided we are here. So let us write like this: offset, the reference is cell B4, and we want to go down one row and go right 2 columns, and we want the last 2 parameters are optional, so let's leave them out. Now this is the value. From here, 1 row down and 2 columns to the left, 2 columns to the right. I keep saying that. So this is the value, that number 2, this is what is coming. But offset formula is not that simple. See these optional parameters here, they're called as height and width. So from this, once you offset the cursor from here to, once you offset the cell from here to here, you can also specify how big an area you want. By default, Excel returns one cell. At that point, whatever cell is there, that will be given. But you can also say how many cells you want. You can say from this point I want 20 cells, from this point how I want 15 cells, or from this point I want any area of 15 by 20, something like that. And this might seem like, who would ever use something like this, but believe me, the power of this is so much that you will be really surprised once you learn how to use this. Let's imagine, for example, you are getting monthly sales data or monthly project figures or monthly student data in a table every day, every month, and you don't know the size of this information. In most cases, that's how it works. I mean, unless your data is very rigid and fixed, which is I must say you're very lucky if you have like that. In most cases, what happens is, we don't have any idea how big or how small our data set is going to be. It can have like 10 rows. For example, in a month you can make 10 sales, or if you're really lucky you can make like 1,000 sales. So you don't really know how big or how small this information is going to be. But the problem is, most of your formulas, models, reports and dashboards, they're all designed in such a way that they just accept, they look the same no matter what the information is, how much information it is. For example, whether you made 25 sales or 2500 sales, your sales report is going to look more or less similar. I mean, the values in the number of items in the charts will change, but the overall report layout is going to remain the same. So from that point of view, when you are designing the report, you cannot every month do the same activity and then change the formula references and include more rows or include less rows because there is less or more data. That's just not feasible. So that is where offset is going to help us, because you can dynamically set how much data is available, how much data is it that you want with this height and width parameters. For example, let us imagine something like this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let us say this is the information that we have, some fictional database where salespeople are there, or employees are there, and their phone numbers and their how many jobs they have done in the previous reporting period are given here. And next month we are going to add few more employees, or if that's the case. So and you want to find out the total amount of jobs done. So you can say total, not total, sorry, sum. This formula will tell you what is the sum of all the jobs done, how many jobs were finished in that reporting period. But if you add one more person here, let's say Villa and 23, now that information is not counted here because this sum formula is then what you have to do is you have to increase the sum formulas range like this. But this is in a one-off situation you can do this, but if you have to do it like every day and in several places, this is going to be a really painful task. So you can set up an offset formula to do that. The trick is twofold. First, you have to find out how many jobs are available, how many employees are available. So you can just use a count formula, count A. We have to use count A, not count, because count only counts values and you want to count all the non-empty cells in a range. That's strange. I think I have a grouped set. So now there are 12 people, and since we already know our table is going to start here, offset in this cell, from this cell, offset how many rows. Don't offset any rows because you have to stay on the current row. So that's 0 rows, 2 columns, and the height of this offset should be this. How many of our employees are there? That's the height. Now offset will only give a range, so it's going to give all the values like 1 2 3 4 5 6 8 2 4 12 1 23, like that. We don't need the values, we want the sum of them. So you just pass the output of offset to sum like this, and the 71 is coming. if you select all these values and you write a sum here, it's going to be 71. And the moment Bella is gone, of course we are using this column to count, but yeah, if Bella is gone, then this value is automatically changed, but because now the height of the offset is only going to be 11. So this is in a way a pretty dynamic formula, and you can actually simplify this whole stuff by defining a named range against sorry, launched help accidentally. Yeah, so you can convert this whole range here to a named range, this whole setup offset, so that you can use that named range in multiple places. The beauty of offset is that you can, once you define a named range out of this, you can use that named range to define the chart also. For example, for chart input data source data series, you can use output of an offset. Offset output can be fed to charts directly, and it works. So whenever you have a new employee, the chart is also going to show that information very nicely without having to readjust the data source of the chart or anything like that. And that's one of the very powerful uses of offset. I have provided a link to a dynamic named range creation using offset article that was published on PhD a while ago. Please go through that article if this formula sounds interesting to you, because this is an extremely powerful formula and there are a lot of very good uses to it. Now I want to show a small illustration to you so that you can understand how this offset formula works in a visual way. Okay, so here is a small illustration. This what it does is, I have written two example offset formulas, and they both are working from the starting point cell A1, and they are going to offset A1 five rows and 5 columns like this. So now we are in F6 at this point, and from F6 the first formula is saying 2 comma 3, that is give me height of 2 and width of 3. So this little range is what this formula is going to give. Offset A1 5 5 2 3, so the entire highlighted range. Whereas the second formula A1 5 5 1 1 is going to give only the first cell's value, so this value alone, little value. So this is how offset formula works. It's just a small illustration that will help you probably understand how the formula is working in a visual way. Let us create a named range out of offset formula. I'm not sure if you can see. What we will do is we'll create a named range out of this little thing here itself. So I'm just copying this formula as it is, Control C, and then I'm going to insert a name. For some time you may not see anything, and this is a new name box here. What I'm going to say is employee. This is how you can define a new named range in Excel. For the time being, I will just give a small introduction of what named ranges is. In the last week of this lessons, I will come back again and we'll talk more about named ranges. A named range is like a shortcut for your big formulas or set of cells. For example, you can define a named range like this: employee table, and then make it refer to this formula, this range here. From B4 to D14 is employee table. So whenever you need to use, for example, you want to find out how many rows are there in the employee table, you just have to, and Excel automatically counts the value like this, because the employee table is a named range. It's far better and much more readable than using like this rows of. Of course it is replacing here, but then let us try this. Yeah, this is a little confusing if somebody wants to debug or audit this formula, but here it is very clear to you what the source data is. So when you refer this information in a dashboard or somewhere else, it's very easy to understand what it is referring to when you use a named range. So that is the main purpose of named ranges. Named ranges actually simplify a lot of tasks because they make you write elegant and simpler formulas, and they're easy to be fed to a chart as input source, and they can be used for several other places like conditional formatting or data validation and things like that. We'll talk more about those things as we go along. For the time being, let us come back here and define a dynamic named range from offset formula. So here I'm going to define a new name and employee jobs, and it refers to this formula. Make sure you put an equal to here and then press OK. So now we have defined a dynamic named range that's called employee jobs. Let us write a formula that will so here I have used that to find out how much is the sum, and Excel shows this blue color lines, but basically all the values are coming from the named range hidden. So the moment I change this to, let us override the count formula by changing this to 8, this thing is going to change because the employee jobs is now different. You can use that like in average or any other formula that accepts a range. You can try that, and it's strange. Let us see why this is giving an error by selecting this and pressing F9. Okay, that is strange because here we are getting average value, but here we are getting an error. Okay, we'll come. I'll try to find it out and then I'll update you in a post. Okay, I found out why the average formula was giving the error. Employee jobs. It's giving an error because when you select employee jobs, you can see that these blue cells are here. They're supposed to be here and here. This is the count and this is the starting point, but Excel moved this because even though the offset formula is offset named range was defined, the references were not absolute, they are relative references. Let me show you. Let us open the employee jobs edit, and here as you can see it, the B6 and B4, they are not absolute, they are relative. So I'm going to press F4 on these things, so they always refer to the same cells no matter where we are. Okay, this was new for me because I thought the Excel offset formulas are going to work just the way they are. Now this is funny because it's referring to the wrong cells again. The first one has to be B2, so B4, and the second one has to be B2. Yes. Okay, so now our average and sum are working fine. Yeah. So this is another thing that I have learned while I'm talking to you, and I'm sure we'll learn so many more such things. So remember to define absolute named ranges with offset formulas with absolute references. Don't use relative references because as you move to a different cell, Excel is rearranging the absolute references to the reference of the offset formula to a new new cell. Okay, so this is how you can use a named range inside a formula, and the named range itself is dynamic because it can have like 3 cells or it can have 20 cells, which is not going to work because there are not that many values, but then you get the picture. And you can easily use the same named range in anywhere else. You can use the named range, for example in a dynamic data validation list or in conditional formatting or as charts input source and things like that. When we revisit the offset formula at a later point in our course, I'm going to show you how to use the offset formula, the named ranges based on offset formulas to make dynamic charts. But in this lesson, this concludes our lesson because we have learned how to use offset formula. We know what the syntax is, and we have also seen a small illustration of how it works, visual illustration. I will also give you some links to the offset article as well as how to make dynamic ranges using offset tutorial on PhD, so that you can read up further on this particular topic. Remember, offset is a really costly formula because when you use it over a range of like few thousand cells or a million cells, it's going to slow down Excel quite a bit because it's a volatile formula, and it will be recalculated every time anything in the Excel changes, not just the values in that range. So from that point, I would advise you to go easy on offset. Unless otherwise it is required, don't use it. One of the fantastic uses is of course defining dynamic named ranges and dynamic chart ranges. But otherwise, if you want a functionality where you know the starting point and you have to go to the end point like this, you may want to use the index formula. The index formula was taught in the lesson on VLOOKUP, match and index. So you can use that formula because that's also powerful, and it is much more faster or simpler to understand and use compared to offset. Okay, I will see you in the next lesson. Until then, you have a good time. Thanks.